It was a cold and dark night on Christmas Eve 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family, consisting of George and Jenny and their 10 children, were getting ready to celebrate the holiday. But their festive mood was soon shattered by a mysterious fire that engulfed their house and the disappearance of 5 of their children. What happened to the Sodder children, and why did their parents believe for the rest of their lives that they were still alive? This is the story of one of the most baffling unsolved cases in American history. George Sodder was born in Sardinia, Italy in 1895. He immigrated to the United States when he was 13 and settled in West Virginia, where he worked as a driver and later as a coal truck owner. He married Jenny Cipriani, also an Italian immigrant, and they had 10 children: Joe, John, Marion, Morris, Martha, Louise, Jenny Jr., Betty, Sylvia, and Jimmy. The Sodders were a well-respected and prosperous family in their community, but they also faced some hostility from some locals who did not like George's outspoken criticism of the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini in Italy. In the weeks leading up to the fire, the Sodders noticed some strange occurrences around their house. A man came to their door and asked George about hauling work, but then pointed to the fuse boxes and said they would cause a fire someday. George was puzzled because he had just had the wiring checked and approved by the local power company. Another man tried to sell the family life insurance, but when George declined, he warned him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. George dismissed him as a crank. A few days before Christmas, the older Sodder sons noticed a car parked along the main highway, with its occupants watching the younger children as they came home from school. On Christmas Eve, the Sodders had a quiet evening at home. They exchanged gifts and listened to the radio. Around 10 p.m., George and Jenny went to bed, while the older children stayed up a bit longer. Sylvia, who was 2 years old, slept in her parents' bedroom. Around midnight, the phone rang. Jenny got up and answered it. It was a woman's voice asking for a name Jenny did not recognize and laughing in a weird way. Jenny told her she had the wrong number and hung up. She noticed that the lights were still on, the curtains were not drawn, and the front door was unlocked. She assumed that the children who had stayed up had gone to bed in the attic, where Morris, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr., and Betty slept. She turned off the lights, closed the curtains, locked the door, and went back to bed. An hour later, she was awakened by a loud thud on the roof, followed by a rolling noise. She thought it might be Santa Claus and went back to sleep. Half an hour later, she smelled smoke. She woke up George and saw that the room was on fire. They got up and ran out of the room, screaming for the children. They found Marion, John, and George Jr. in the hallway and told them to escape. George ran to the attic, but the stairs were engulfed in flames. He shouted for the children, but there was no answer. He ran outside and tried to use his ladder to reach the attic window, but the ladder was missing. He tried to use his coal truck to climb on, but the truck would not start. He tried to break the window with a barrel, but it was too heavy. He and his sons tried to scoop water from a rain barrel, but it was frozen solid. He and Jenny watched helplessly as the house burned down, with their 5 children trapped inside. The Sodders had a phone in their house, but it was not working. Marion ran to a neighbor's house and called the fire department, but she could not reach anyone. Another neighbor, who was a driver for the fire department, saw the fire and called the fire chief, F.J. Morris, but he did not answer. He tried to call the operator, but she could not reach anyone either. He drove to the fire station himself but found it empty. He tracked down some firefighters and alerted them to the fire, but by the time they arrived, it was 8 a.m. and the house was reduced to ashes. Morris and his men searched the site for the remains of the children, but they found nothing. No bones, no skulls, no teeth, no clothing, no traces of human flesh. Morris told the Sodders that the fire was so hot that it cremated the children completely. He suggested that they leave the site undisturbed until the state police could conduct a more thorough investigation. He then left, taking a few bones and a heart that he claimed to have found among the rubble. The Sodders were devastated by the loss of their children, but they also had doubts about the official explanation. How could a fire cremate 5 bodies in such a short time when household appliances and furniture were still recognizable? Why did the phone, the ladder, and the truck not work that night? Who was the woman who called at midnight, and what was the noise on the roof? They decided to conduct their own investigation and hired a private detective named C.C. Tinsley. They also planted flowers and built a fence around the site and erected a billboard with pictures of the missing children, offering a reward for any information. The billboard attracted a lot of attention, and the Sodders received many tips and leads, some more credible than others. Some people claimed to have seen the children that night, or in the days and years after. Some said they were kidnapped by the Sicilian mafia, who had a vendetta against George for his anti-fascist views. Some said they were taken to Italy, or to a convent, or to an orphanage. Some said they were still alive, but in hiding. Some said they knew where they were, but wanted money for the information. The Sodders followed up on every clue, but none of them led to a conclusive answer. In 1968, the Sodders received a letter from Kentucky with no return address. Inside was a photo of a young man with dark hair and features similar to the Sodders. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, ye little boys, A901 32 or 35. The Sodders were convinced that the photo was of their son Louis, who was 10 years old when he disappeared. They hired another detective to go to Kentucky and find the sender, but he never returned and they never heard from him again. They added the photo to the billboard, hoping that someone would recognize him. George Sodder died in 1969, still believing that his children were alive. Jenny Sodder wore black for the rest of her life and never gave up hope. She died in 1989, and the billboard was taken down. The surviving Sodder children and grandchildren continued to search for answers and to keep the memory of the missing children alive. They created a website and appeared on radio and TV shows and in magazines and newspapers. They also contacted the FBI and asked for the case to be reopened, but they were told that it was too old and out of their jurisdiction. The mystery of the Sodder children remains unsolved to this day. No one knows for sure if they died in the fire or if they survived and were taken away by someone. No one knows who was behind the fire or why they targeted the Sodders. No one knows what happened to the bones and the heart that the fire chief claimed to have found, or why he later admitted that they were not human, but from a cow. No one knows if the photo from Kentucky was really of Louis or who sent it. No one knows if the Sodder children are still alive or where they are, or if they ever tried to contact their family. The Sodder Family Memorial stands at the site of the former house with a plaque that reads, "In sacred memory of our children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty, gone but not forgotten, December 24th, 1945. It is a testament to the love and the grief of a family that never gave up hope.